Do you remember what you ate for breakfast yesterday morning? Was it a familiar dish you've had for years, or something new you thought was healthy? Did you simply pour a glass of orange juice, open a pack of instant cereal, or heat up a bowl of low-fat vegetable soup while watching the news? If so, you're not alone. I used to do the same. I am a neurologist with over 20 years of experience. For a long time, I believed only smokers, obese people, diabetics, or those with high blood pressure were at risk of stroke. I believed that if an elderly person lived moderately, ate cleanly, and didn't drink alcohol, they almost had no reason to worry about stroke. But then one morning not long ago, an emergency case completely changed my thinking. The patient was a woman over 70, living in California, healthy, no underlying conditions, no smoking, no alcohol. Her daughter told me through tears that her mother ate very moderately, with vegetable soup, whole grain cereal, and fresh squeezed orange juice every morning. Everything was textbook perfect. But she still had a stroke. When she was brought to the emergency room, one side of her face had drooped, she couldn't speak, and her left hand almost had no response. I looked at her brain scan and stood silent for a few seconds. Not because I had never seen a stroke before, but because I never expected the cause to come from something so familiar. The foods we think are good and healthy sometimes are the very things that put pressure on the brain every morning without anyone realizing. I know you might be a bit surprised hearing this. You might have felt a little dizzy after breakfast, or heard a loved one complain of tiredness after their first meal. And then we ignore it. Because we think it's nothing serious. I used to ignore it too. Until I realized those first moments of the day are when the body and brain are most fragile. If we don't pay attention, even one meal can become the last straw. But don't worry. I'm not here to scare you. At the end of this video, I will clearly explain what that familiar food is, why it is especially dangerous for elderly people, and most importantly, how you should change so you can still eat well while protecting yourself. But before that, I want you to take a few minutes to listen to this story. Because I believe after hearing this, you will never look at your breakfast the same way again. The patient that day was named Linda. 73 years old. She lived with her husband in a peaceful suburb of California. A careful and disciplined person. She always woke up on time, walked every morning, and ate very regularly. No fried foods. No red meat. No alcohol. No smoking. Her breakfast was prepared exactly as experts recommend. A bowl of low-fat vegetable soup warmed up from the night before, a slice of whole grain bread, and a glass of unsweetened orange juice. Each item was carefully chosen by her. Each was something she believed would keep her healthy. Her daughter said that for the past 10 years, she never missed a morning without eating those exact foods. Her family was very reassured. They believed she was living very clean and healthy. And honestly, if I only looked at that list on paper, I wouldn't suspect anything either. But just 1 hour after breakfast, she began to feel tired. She told her husband she felt dizzy and wanted to lie down for a moment. Then, when trying to stand, she felt numbness in her left hand, and her speech started to slur. Her husband thought she had low blood sugar and quickly gave her more orange juice to drink. But at that time, she couldn't hold the glass. One side of her face began to droop. Her words were no longer clear. When the ambulance arrived, she was still conscious but could not express herself clearly. Only when we did an MRI did the results reveal the truth: a small area in the left brain was damaged due to ischemia. I sat looking at Linda's medical record and found it hard to believe. No clear risk factors. No underlying disease. No warning signs. So what made her brain unable to hold on? What in a supposedly healthy breakfast could lead to a stroke? I started retracing each food item, each biological reaction, each mechanism of cerebral blood vessels in elderly people. And I realized something that medical textbooks don't make clear enough. There are things that are not wrong to use separately, but when combined and entering a body worn out by years, they can become the last straw. Canned vegetable soup, even if low-fat, can still contain very high sodium levels. Whole grain bread, if it's a prepackaged instant type, often contains added refined sugar and preservatives. Orange juice, though unsweetened, still contains a large amount of fructose absorbed very quickly because all the fiber is gone. And when these three combine, the blood becomes thicker, the intravascular pressure rises, blood sugar fluctuates faster, and the small blood vessels, especially deep in the brain, can no longer adjust in time. At that moment, I looked back at the medical record and silently wondered, if that morning she had only changed one of those three items, would this have happened? If she ate fresh oranges instead of drinking juice? If she cooked thin porridge instead of using canned soup? If she had real whole grain bread instead of processed packaged type? I don't have a definite answer. But I do know that if we don't start questioning familiar foods, there will be more people like Linda. People who think they are eating right and living healthy, until one morning they wake up unable to speak anymore. When I sat down to carefully analyze Linda's breakfast, I began to see something that even I had previously overlooked. A bowl of vegetable soup that seemed light actually contained over 800 milligrams of sodium per serving. That is an amount of salt exceeding the recommended limit for elderly people, especially for those with weak blood vessels or a history of mild blood pressure disorders. High sodium causes the blood to retain water, suddenly increasing vessel wall pressure, and within less than an hour, the brain's circulatory system has to strain to adapt. The whole grain bread she used was a prepackaged type, supplemented with preservatives and a bit of corn syrup to enhance flavor. These substances, although small in quantity, can cause blood sugar to spike rapidly after a meal for elderly people. And when blood sugar levels rise too quickly, insulin is secreted to cope, leading to fluctuations in blood pressure, blood flow, and vasoconstriction in the brain. But what I want you to pay even more attention to is the glass of orange juice. It sounds very healthy. No added sugar, no preservatives. But if you drink it in the morning on an empty stomach, especially over 60 years old, the pure fructose will be absorbed very quickly into the blood without being balanced by fiber. That causes blood sugar to rise sharply within 15 to 30 minutes after drinking. And if your body is still in a state of partial awakening, not yet ready for strong organ activity, then that wake-up is no longer healthy. These three foods, often recommended in many health menus, unintentionally create a risky combination for elderly people. They thicken the blood, cause blood vessels to strain while the brain is still in its most fragile state. And if you think those reactions are mild, just listen to this sentence from Linda's daughter. My mom just said I feel a little tired and lay down to rest, but when I called, she couldn't respond anymore. A stroke doesn't come like a storm. It comes like a silent breeze, no noise, no warning. And it leaves only a helpless emptiness in the eyes of loved ones. I know you might be startled, or trying to recall what you had for breakfast this morning. I don't tell this to scare you. I tell you so you understand that there are foods you still believe are good that actually do not suit a brain aging every day. And if you or a loved one ever felt blurred vision, heaviness in the head, or mild numbness in the fingers after breakfast, please don't take it lightly. That's not a small matter. It is the whisper of the circulatory system, the warning sound from small blood vessels silently struggling to cry for help. And if you recognize these feelings in yourself or someone close, I hope you won't skip the next part. Because there, I will recount the exact moment when Linda crossed the line between a normal person and a stroke patient in just a few minutes. A moment that if someone in the family had known how to read the early signals, things might have been different. The moment everything changed very quickly. After breakfast, Linda only felt slightly tired. A very normal feeling, especially for an elderly person after a night of poor sleep. She rested on a chair in the living room. No headache. No dizziness. No nausea. Just a bit tired. And that made everyone careless. Until she tried to stand to make tea, her husband heard the sound of a glass falling on the floor. He rushed over and found her quietly sitting, her face slightly tilted to one side, her eyes still aware but unable to speak. She was trying to say too tired but couldn't get the words out. The left hand did not move. The index finger slightly curled and trembled. One side of the face began to sag as if slipping out of control. Immediately, they called an ambulance. Upon arrival at the hospital, she was still conscious, still looking at me, but unable to answer questions. We acted quickly for emergency care. An urgent brain MRI was done. And there, on the black and white screen, appeared a small lesion in the left hemisphere. Specifically in the Broca's area, the Center for Language and Motor Coordination. I have seen that lesion many times throughout my career, but this time it left me speechless. Because I could not find any clear risk factors. No high blood pressure. No lipid disorders. No history of heart disease. No diabetes. Only one thing clearly appeared in the records: breakfast a few hours earlier. Her blood showed sodium levels nearly 20% higher than normal. Blood sugar rose quickly then dropped quickly. Blood pressure fluctuated mildly during the first 2 hours. All of these formed the perfect pieces for a mild ischemic stroke in an elderly person. And at that moment, I remembered her daughter's eyes in the emergency room. When she whispered to me, "My mom eats very clean." I thought it was just because she ate a little less today. But the truth was not in eating less. It was in what we still think is right. Healthy does not mean absolutely safe, especially for the elderly. A seemingly familiar meal, when placed in a body silently changing every year, can become the final factor pushing a person beyond the fragile boundary between stability and damage. Just a few hours after a seemingly perfect breakfast, Linda lost the ability to speak. All because of 3 familiar foods. Simply because we have never questioned those already good things. That is the climax of this case. And that is also why I decided I could no longer remain silent. Because if only a few choices each morning were adjusted, she might not have had to lie in a hospital bed. And who knows, someone listening to this story might also avoid the same fate. After Linda's case, I spent a long time thinking about breakfast for elderly people. I started reviewing the latest research, comparing it with my own experience, and also consulting colleagues who work at stroke rehabilitation centers. The conclusion is not about strict dieting. Nor is it about following a complicated meal plan. It lies in 2 words: appropriate. Appropriate for an aging body. Appropriate for blood vessels that are gradually weakening. Appropriate for a biological rhythm that slows down year by year. And from there, I began writing very specific advice for patients and their families, especially those over 60 years old. First, don't choose foods just because the label says healthy. Instead, look at the ingredient list. If a food contains over 300 milligrams of sodium per serving, leave it on the shelf. Especially canned soups, broths, and processed vegetarian foods. An elderly person's body only needs about 1/3 the salt of a young person. Too much sodium causes blood vessels to constrict, making blood pressure fluctuate in ways the elderly cannot adapt to. Second, don't let refined sugar sneak into your breakfast. Many instant cereals contain corn syrup or cane sugar. Even if labeled low sugar, they can cause a strong insulin spike. When blood sugar rises sharply then drops quickly, the brain's blood vessels have to strain to adjust. And if there is already microvascular damage, this is a real risk. The solution is not to give up cereal. But it lies in choosing truly whole grains, without added flavors, cooking slowly with warm water, adding chia seeds, a little nut butter or soft fruits like ripe bananas. Third, instead of drinking orange juice, eat fresh oranges. An orange contains fiber, which helps slow down sugar absorption. You don't need to give up fruit, but you should eat the whole fruit instead of just drinking the juice. This simple change has helped many of my patients improve their early morning blood sugar levels and reduce fatigue after eating. Fourth, eat in a calm state. Many elderly people have the habit of eating breakfast while listening to the news or thinking about household matters. But the brain after a night of rest needs to be awakened gently. A meal is not only about nutrition but also a time to reset your biological rhythm. Sitting down to eat slowly, chewing thoroughly, without rushing is how you help your blood flow to the brain stay stable. And finally, don't forget to listen to your body. If after breakfast you feel dizzy, have shoulder fatigue, slight numbness in your hands, or speak a little slowly, don't assume it's normal. These signs could be early warnings from your brain. Tell your loved ones. Write down the date, time, feelings, and what you ate. That is the first step to preventing greater damage in the future. I have given these guidelines to many of my patients. And many of them came back after a few weeks telling me that just by changing a few small things, they felt completely different each morning. Less numbness. More alertness. No more heavy head feelings after eating. The body starts healing from the smallest things. And if you're still listening to me here, I believe you can also start again right in your own kitchen, starting tomorrow morning. 6 weeks after that stroke, Linda returned to my clinic on a sunny Thursday morning. She came alone. She opened the door herself, walked in, a little slow but steady. Her face looked bright and very different from the first time we met in the emergency room. I asked if she still felt numbness in her hand in the morning. She smiled, raised her left hand lightly, opened and then closed it. She said she still practices hand squeezing every morning as a ritual. And that morning was the 31st consecutive day she completed all 5 opening and closing motions without feeling tired. I asked about her breakfast, and she described every detail. No more canned soup. She replaced it with oatmeal cooked thin with chia seeds and nut butter, sometimes sprinkled with a few slices of banana. No more orange juice, replaced by fresh oranges eaten segment by segment, sometimes a thin slice of apple. No more instant cereal, replaced by a slice of homemade rye bread or half a steamed sweet potato. Every morning, she drinks a small glass of warm water, sits still for a minute before getting up, places her hand on her chest, and takes 3 deep breaths. Not because the doctor told her to, but because she felt her body really needed gentler treatment than before. She spoke softly but clearly that for the first time in many years, she felt like she was truly living, not just existing. Every morning when waking up, no longer fearing fatigue or dizziness. She felt more alert. Her skin looked brighter. Her eyes saw more clearly. And what moved me the most was when she said this: "I never thought that just a few small changes could make me feel like I've just escaped a winding road and stepped onto a smoother path." Her test results reflected that as well. Blood sugar was more stable. Blood pressure no longer fluctuated in the early morning. A follow-up MRI showed no new damage. Those numbers gave me peace of mind. But what made me happier was how she talked about self-care as a gift, not a burden. She said, "Every morning I think about the fact that I can still sit, eat, and smile, and I feel lucky. And I don't want to lose that luck just because of an unnoticed habit." Linda's story is not a miracle. It's the result of a series of simple but right choices. And it's also a very clear reminder for all of us. Just a small change, a minute of pause each morning, a slow-cooked bowl of porridge, a carefully eaten orange segment. A deep breath before standing up is enough to save an entire body from the silent risks waiting at the end of the road. I believe if Linda can do it, so can you. And if you are caring for your elderly loved ones, this story is not just for them but also for you. Because every small action we change today can preserve memory, voice, steps, and alertness for the years ahead. And that's something no prescription can do for you. I tell Linda's story not to make you worried but to help you understand that we always have another door to walk through each morning. A door not opened by medicine or machines, but by the choices you make at the very first moment of the day. A segment of orange instead of juice. A slow-cooked porridge instead of canned soup. A minute of lying still instead of rushing to get up. These things may sound small, but they are how you give yourself the chance to keep your memory, your voice, your steps, and your presence next to your loved ones every day. I don't expect you to change everything. I just hope you start paying a little more attention. Look more carefully at the foods you choose. Listen more closely to how your body feels after breakfast. Listen deeply when your heart beats unusually fast, when your head feels a little dizzy, when your hand tingles a bit. The body never lies to you. It always tries to speak, even if only in very small signals. And if you listen long enough, you will save yourself from the regrets I have seen too many times in the emergency room. You don't need to become a nutrition expert. You don't need to calculate every little number. You just need to live a little lighter. Slow down every morning. Be gentle with your food. Be gentle with the pressure. Take gentle steps with a body that is aging day by day. When you do that, you are not only protecting yourself but also paving the way for your loved ones to follow. One person changing can inspire an entire family. A slow breakfast can start a whole year of deeper living. If you've read this far, I believe you are truly serious about your health. And if you find this story helpful, please leave a comment below. It can be just a few simple words. But who knows, someone reading it might change starting tomorrow morning. And if you want me to continue sharing real, gentle stories that have the power to preserve life, please hit the subscribe button. Every week, I'll be back, not to lecture, but to walk alongside you. To help you protect the most precious thing we have, a clear, peaceful morning where we can still recognize each other.